Hello everyone, Kent.Bressler here. I want to welcome you to Kent's Kidney Stories. During our time together over these podcasts, I'd like to discuss kidney disease. I'd like to tell you about my journey as a transplant patient, but also talk about dialysis, kidney donation, and just about anything else that might be of interest. Kent's Kidney Stories, podcast endorsed and sponsored by kidneysolutions.org.
Hello everyone, this is Kent.Bressler, and this is Kent's Kidney Stories. It's sponsored by kidneysolutions.org. And I was wanting to welcome you in. I have two important guests this morning. It's morning where we are, afternoon where they are. Anyway, I'm going to explain that to you after we get going. I want to thank everybody for getting vaccinated. And if you haven't been vaccinated, wake up, get down there and get it done. It's very important. And if anybody's surrounding you, your relatives or your friends or so-called friends that haven't been vaccinated, kick them in the keister and get them down there. It's very important that you do that. Okay, this morning we always start with prayer, as you well know, and that's what we're going to do. So bow your heads, fold your hands. Lord, thank you for the stillness when I can relax before you and lay my impatience with other people before you. Smooth the furrows from my brow, the lines from my face, the frustrations from my heart, the heavy loads from my mind, the searing irritations from my soul. I ask for the graciousness of patience, the ability to relax when I must wait. May a quiet heart and mind attend to me. Make straight my path and rest ever shorter my temper with a sense of humor. We ask this in your name, Lord, in Jesus Christ. Amen. Okay, folks, get ready. Get your seatbelts on because we're going to have a fantastic interview today. And we are not going to rush through this because these two friends that I've garnered are near and dear to me, and we're going to have a good time. And I hope you all do too. I want to introduce to you kidney recipient Jason Sharp, who lives in Salisbury, Austria, actually back and forth in Vienna, Austria, and his donor, Ben Street, who lives in London, England. And I can't even begin to tell you how interesting their story is, so I'm going to let them tell it to you. So, Ben, I'm going to start with you this morning, and Jasper, you just chime in. Don't sit there and let him tell any fibs, okay? Make sure you get right in there. Hey, Ben, tell us how this all started.
Okay. Well, it all started. Now, you see, you could correct me, jump in. Jasper can jump in, correct me anytime, obviously, as you say. I think it started with a phone call in 2015. I was in my flat in South London, and I got a phone call from a guy called Alex. Alex is an old friend of Jaspers from back in school. Now, I've known Jasper since New Year's Day 2002. That was the day that we met. And we met in Venice, Italy, where he was working at a museum and I was doing an internship at the same museum. And I happened to, we had a mutual friend, I think, and then he had a spare room in his flat. And to cut a long story short, I lived with him in Italy and we've been great friends and sometimes work collaborators and dancing partners and dancing competitors ever since. But that's another story. This is not what this podcast is about. Also, you get no visual components, so you're not seeing any of the moves I could bust out. Anyway, so I get this phone call. I get a phone call in 2015 from Alex, and this guy Alex tells me that our friend Jasper is very ill and he will at some point in the future Nobody knows exactly when, but at some point in the future, he's going to need to have a kidney transplant. And this was all new to me. And he said, might there be, he was giving me no pressure. And I just want to say at this point that the whole process from that phone call in 2015 until the actual operation, spoiler alert, it did actually happen at the beginning of June this year. I've never been under any pressure from anyone involved. I mean, that's not like a legal disclaimer. I know it sounds like that, but one thing that was very notable about it is that everyone was very easygoing in terms of whether I wanted to change my mind at any point for whatever reason. Anyway, so Alex called me and he said, yeah, so this is the situation. Do you think there might be a possibility at some point where you might consider perhaps being this donor for Jasper? And I said, yeah, of course. Meaning, yeah, of course I consider it. And it was a long time ago, and you know, and I spoke to other friends, and I found out there was a little group of us who Alex had phoned, close friends of Jaspers over the years, who might potentially put themselves forward as a possible donor. So it was like, you know, that was 2015, and kind of gradually, as the years went by, or as the months went by, first of all, a little bit like a reality TV show, gradually people were getting voted off, like from this group of people. Because like gradually they were dropping off for various different reasons. You know, one guy, a couple of people actually were the wrong blood type. Somebody else, their family had objections. All totally legitimate. As it went along, it ended up being, I can't remember at what point, but at a certain point it was just going to be me. So that knowledge of potentially becoming a kidney donor was in the background of my life from 2015 until 2020, let's say for the sake of argument, 5 years. It's in the back of my mind.
I always have to suppress a laugh when Ben says that we met on New Year's Day, whenever it was, because it makes it sound like we woke up drunken in a street in a house somewhere, and it was actually much more sober than that. But yeah, so Ben's side of the story begins in 2015. Mine begins a little bit earlier in the summer of 2013, when I received the diagnosis that my kidneys were not working. And obviously it was a bit of a shock, because I thought I was going to I had ambitions to live to somewhere between 400 and 500.
Yeah.
And,
that's years, right? Years?
Years, yeah. So suddenly this was a threat to that plan. And my doctor at the time said two things to me, which have always stayed in my mind. One is, she estimated it would be somewhere between 1 and 7 years before I would need a transplant. And she was almost exactly spot on with that, because we tried to do this last summer, and we'll tell you a little bit more about that later. And the second thing she said to me was, which has always stayed in my mind, there's no medical evidence for this suggestion that she's going to make, but they all tend to believe it, which is that try to find a kidney from somebody that you love, because we all feel that you will take to it and it will take to you.
That's interesting.
Better perhaps than an anonymous donor. And my own family were basically ruled out at a very early stage, because the kidney condition that I have runs through at least one side of my family, and there's a suspicion that there are certain aspects on the other side of the family as well. So immediately I had to look beyond my relatives and look into friends, and that's where Ben entered the situation. And so it was, I had about a year of feeling pretty okay, and then I spoke to this old friend of mine, Alex, and he began to mobilize the crew.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, and Ben, I mean, several of them came from overseas, came to Vienna, did all the tests, Some of them didn't even know what blood group they were, so we had to get them just a simple blood test. And as Ben said, one by one, they were sort of voted off the Love Island, if we're going to continue the metaphor for a little bit longer. And until it was just Ben and I standing there, having to expose ourselves in all sorts of ways to each other. And I'm going to stop with this metaphor pretty quickly.
Yeah, please.
So, and yeah, that took us, you know, and then I think what Ben was maybe about to say is that between 2015 and last summer, there were sort of moments where things came to another sort of moment of activity. Ben would have to come out to Vienna, do 3 or 4 days of all sorts of tests and scans and x-rays, and have his blood pressure monitored every 30 minutes for a 24-hour period, all sorts of strange things. And just to check that he was the Ferrari that everybody thought he was, and that there were no gremlins under the hood.
So to speak.
Fortunately, if you listen to my voice now, and if you could see me, you realize that I have had a Ferrari engine put into this Fiat Uno of a body that I had before. So I've been the recipient of not just a kidney, but a huge personality and physical upgrade at the same time. So I'm hoping that my dancing skills will attain a certain higher level of competence than they were able to before as well.
So this whole thing, if you really think about it, because the audience is not going to pick up on this, this was not just, oh, by the way, I'm going to get a cab and run downtown. This was a flight from London to Vienna.
Yeah.
And then and stay in Vienna and then come back. All right. So I want them to get that perspective. So
yeah, I mean, I think what I've always said is, you know, the downside of this experience is that Jasper lives in Vienna, but the upside of it is that Jasper lives in Vienna.
Yeah, right.
Because Vienna is, I mean, I live in London. Getting to Vienna is not impossible, obviously, but it's fairly complicated. But he does happen to live in Vienna, which is I'm sure this isn't breaking news to anyone, but it's a beautiful city and a wonderful place to spend time. So I can't say the same for the hospital necessarily, but getting to go to the city and you know, eat Schnitzel and hang out in these beautiful places. So there's an element of, you know, that slightly took the edge off it. But it's true. I mean, it's a strange thing. I don't know if other people had this experience too, but even as Jasper was saying, you know, I would go over sometimes and I would be there for maybe 3 days, and I would spend a chunk of that time in hospital having lots of different tests. Even then, because we didn't have a date for the operation, even then it felt quite abstract. Even then it felt like, yeah, this is for something that might happen in the future. You know, it was no real skin off my nose to do those things. I just thought, yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm going to donate. I spoke to people. I didn't tell everyone about it. I had a kind of quite relaxed attitude to whether I told people that I was doing it or not. And generally people said, oh, wow, okay. Oh, you're right. Oh, so when are you going to do that? I said, well, I don't know. I mean, when he needs it, and who knows when that's going to be. So there was always a sense of, I'd go over and do these tests that would be just topping up the data. Like, so like they'd be like, oh, okay, so we know that this still works, that still works. That's how it felt the whole time. And so it didn't have a kind of sense of, there wasn't a sense of like a countdown to this, to those experiences, to be honest. Like it was just kind of, yeah, we're just kind of carrying on.
Yeah.
But then it did, you know.
Yeah.
You can go ahead, Jasper. Yeah.
Not that for a second I'm comparing the usefulness of these two things, but I received 162 grams of kidney. Ben received about 42 kilograms of Schnitzel. Again, I'm not even putting this into the same ballpark of usefulness.
Like I say, I wasn't paid for this. I wasn't coerced. That Schnitzel was, you know.
That was a kind of gratuity.
He said he wasn't under pressure, but the Schnitzel becomes quite, you know, you need a Schnitzel every so it had its own dynamic of pressure building.
So you're in hospital. Like when you're in the hospital, these folks are not speaking English.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
they're speaking
Fine.
German. Some of them worse English.
Some of them could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No. That's a good point, Ken. Yeah. I mean, no, it's like, it's not just it's not just the travel. It's also the feeling of being in another country. But I have to say, that a lot of people in Vienna speak great English in a way that people in London don't speak great German. So that was a good advantage for me. But there was a little element of it, I have to say, where there was a virtue in the ignorance, in my own ignorance, It's like I would hear doctors talking, and while I was lying on a table and they were putting something into me or taking something out of me. And because I couldn't fully understand it, I was in my little bubble of ignorance, which kind of helped, probably.
Just shaking your head yes and no. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. Do whatever you need to do.
Yeah.
I tried to accompany Ben for those tests as often as I could. And there were a few moments where the doctor would say something to me that would last about 6 minutes. And I would give about a 12-word translation to Ben. And he'd look at me like, what are you not telling me? I'm sure that was a bit longer.
You speak German, see, so you could do that, right? Yeah. So that's good.
It was actually quite easy to date the journey that we've been on, because my daughter was 2 days old when I received the diagnosis. She'd just been born 3 floors up in the same hospital, and every time that Ben came to stay, we would have to turf her out of her bedroom and bring her into our bedroom for a few nights, and Ben would move into her room. And it went from a child-safe room to a room with a few funky clothes to stars on the wall. So you can trace the passage of our kidney journey through this young person's life, actually. So Ben came, I don't know how many times. Specifically for the kidneys, 6 to 8 times, probably. At least once a year to update all these tests. And I would say sometime around the beginning of 2019, it became clear that things were sort of nearing the point at which we understood they probably would at some point. Of course, we had no heads up about how the world was about to change.
Oh,
no. Make a transcontinental process even more complicated. The traveling was the easiest part of this whole thing to begin with. Yeah. And that almost became the hardest part of the whole thing by the end. Just moving from A to B and accessing hospitals, which was the easiest thing before and suddenly became a difficult thing towards the end. So I remember calling Ben or seeing Ben, I think at a certain point in the second half of 2019, saying, my doctor, my nephrologist is pretty sure this is going to happen next year. And we were aiming for April 2020. And of course, you start hearing the first reports of
February,
funny things going on in the world. Yeah. And suddenly it became clear that April was not going to happen. And eventually we got pushed to the middle of August 2020. And Ben hadn't done a cross match for a while, and he needed a raft of tests to be updated. So he came out with his wife and by then baby daughter and his mother. So you also partially date this by Ben's
exactly.
Ben's child as well. And they came out to Vienna about 10 days to 2 weeks before the planned operation. And they took the train all the way from London to Vienna with a night in Frankfurt on the way, having COVID tests at various different stops to allow themselves to cross one international border to another. And
oh my gosh,
it was insane. And eventually they got here, they breathed. The sun was out. We had, we were straight into the hospital the next morning to do the cross match. And then basically 3 or 4 tests a day for a few days until everything was updated. Then we had to wait for the results of the cross match. And then we had about 5 days of downtime before we were due to go into hospital. And we had a list of things we wanted to do, museums we wanted to visit, swimming pools we wanted to frequent, flavors of ice cream we wanted to eat. And then, unfortunately, about 48 hours before we were due to go into hospital, my intestines ruptured in the middle of the night. It was incredibly painful. And they did a CT scan and said there's lots of free air, as I think they call it. And so I was basically rushed in for a pretty emergency operation. They cut me open down the middle. So it was a shock, a huge disappointment, huge anticlimax for Ben, obviously, because there's an element of preparing oneself, you know? And fortunately, they didn't find any perforation in my intestines, which is good. But it was, anyway, and I'd already programmed myself to be in hospital for a couple of weeks. I'd emptied my desk. I'd already set the out of office messages on my email. I was in the frame of mind that I was going to have to deal with some pain, some discomfort, but I thought I'd be dealing with it with Ben lying in the bed next to me. And suddenly I was flying solo and everything was off. And they said, you know, maybe we could do this in 3 months once you're healed. And then, of course, 3 months later, we were in the eye of the storm again with the pandemic. Last autumn was not a particularly good time, I think anywhere, but particularly in both the countries that Ben and I live in. So I ended up needing a second operation in December, where they removed a section of my intestines that was becoming repeatedly infected. And anyway, we found ourselves in sort of February of this year. My numbers were sufficiently bad that I needed to go on dialysis, which I'd been able to avoid to that point because we were trying to time everything so we would preemptively transplant before dialysis was necessary.
Yes.
And anyway, long story short, I did 4 months of dialysis, 3 evenings a week for 4 hours. It was absolutely bearable because I knew that there was an end in sight and it wasn't too far away. And Ben was good at sort of, you know, jollying me along and keeping me going, and was basically remarkable during the whole lead up to the whole thing, just in terms of, you know, we're going to do this and we're going to get there. And this setback we had last August has made me, I remember he said at one point, it's made me even more determined to do it, which was just amazing. So, yeah. And then we got a date of June the, I think, 4th. That was our second attempt to transplant. In the hospital, we were in the gowns. We had our insides flushed out. We got all ready. We woke up in the morning. Ben was. I'll just.
You were in the same room too.
We were on the top floor of the hospital, the 21st floor, in the surgical department rather than the kidney department. And we shared a room. We had an extraordinary view over the whole city of Vienna. It was hot. We went in the day before, and we got ourselves comfortable. I'd had a few dress rehearsals with previous operations, so I sort of was able to guess how some of it would go. But of course, I'd never done anything in tandem with someone else like this. And we got to the stage at 7 o'clock the next morning, got an early wake-up call. I was already taking immunosuppressants. I'd had a last dialysis session, and Ben was wheeled down to theater. And about 45 minutes later, he was back in the door. And
back in the room.
And
that was a very strange. Sorry, I keep cutting out. My Wi-Fi is very spotty.
You're fine. You're fine. It's okay.
It keeps cutting out at the moment where I try and say a really naughty anecdote as well, doesn't it? Isn't that coincidental? Anyway, so yeah, I really was being wheeled through the hospital corridors, saying goodbye to the nurses. They were giving me the high fives, getting pumped up because I was really feeling quite positive. I know it's kind of mad. I can't quite understand my own attitude towards this experience sometimes, to be honest. But nevertheless, I was feeling quite pumped up for it. I think it was curiosity. That's been quite an important factor in my experience of this. Curiosity about the experience of what it's going to be like. I haven't done it before, and I will never do it again. Anyway,
You better
yeah,
not.
well, I mean, yeah, that would be problematic. The guy was, I was really genuinely lying on my back in the hospital bed outside the doors to the operating theatre when he got a phone call. It was like something from a farce. He got a phone call, and the call was saying, no, it's not going to happen today. I didn't know what was being said because it was all being said in very rapid German. But I knew something was wrong, obviously. So he just brought me back upstairs, and I was back in the room. And Jaspers' first words to me were, "Well, that was quick."
Yeah, I mean, we then waited for a while, and basically it turned out that at least 2 teams had worked through the night on a very, very complicated operation procedure, and they were completely fried, and there was not enough manpower to assemble a completely new, fresh team, and they wanted to be dealing with us under ideal circumstances, and they felt circumstances were not ideal at that point. So they explained it to us. There was no decision to make. It was absolutely the right thing to do. So we were sent away for another 4 days of downtime. So we sampled some more ice cream flavors and probably had another Schnitzel or 2, and went back into hospital a few days later, a few pounds heavier, and that quickly was flushed out of us again as soon as we arrived in hospital. Anyway, June the 8th, we went back in. So that's about 5 weeks ago from the day we're talking now.
Yeah.
And we kind of knew what we were doing. We were back in exactly the same beds in the same room with the same wonderful view. And we knew how to operate the remote control for the television by that point. We knew that the enema was coming, so we steeled ourselves. And I began the immunosuppressants again. And I'm sort of making light of this because at some stages it's been the only way to, or it's been an instinctive way to deal with it. Not the only way. It's been an instinctive way that both of us have dealt with this, is with humor and the absurdity of what you have to do at different stages is so extreme and so unprecedented and so unknown to you that it's not about not thinking about it, because we both thought deeply and intensively about this. And Ben certainly doesn't do, or anyone in Ben's shoes doesn't do what they do without deeply, profoundly questioning the idea of doing this. But at the same time, we understood quite quickly, I think, what was being asked of us and how things were going to go. We processed it quite quickly, and then we parked things, and then just began to dig into the absurdity of it, and had fun with that.
Yeah.
And sharing a room was a key factor in enabling that to continue right up to the last minute. And from the moment we were both back in the room, the first day after the operation didn't have a great deal of humor to it. We were both sore, we were both hurting, but we were both, I think, internally elated and relieved that we'd finally crossed this threshold that we'd been edging closer to and had a few full starts at.
Yeah.
So the operation itself went extremely well. Ben was in theater for about 90 minutes to 2 hours longer than was planned, because his kidney was obviously set quite deep, and it took them, he was operated on, actually, Ben, maybe you need to tell this story about
the machine.
Yeah, about the machine.
Well, it's an amazing thing, I mean, both Jasper and I work in arts. I'm an art historian, teacher, and writer and things. So I got a bit of a kick out of this, because the machine that they were going to use for my surgery was called the Da Vinci Machine.
Yeah.
And it looked like, it's like
it's
a robot.
Yeah.
It looks like something that might have been designed by Leonardo da Vinci on a wet Wednesday afternoon in a notebook. But made of wood. I looked it up ahead of time, and one of the amazing things about the Da Vinci Machine is that to advertise how precise and finessed the machine is, there's a little promotional video that the makers made of the video peeling the skin off a grape.
Yes,
you know that one,
I've
Ken?
seen it. Yes, I've seen that.
Familiar.
Yes,
Amazing. So I thought, well, that's great. I mean, I don't know how similar that is to what this machine is going to have to do, but that seems like a very exciting party trick for a robot. So I thought, well, this is great. So when I got into, so I thought, wow, the name is fantastic, and it's so finessed and precise. That's amazing. And I saw it. I saw the machine. I have a very, very vivid, very precise memory of the experience of the morning of the 9th of June, being wheeled down for the third time lucky, being wheeled down into the operating theatre, having my arms strapped in with, sounds way more dramatic than it was, like with Velcro, and just having lots of people around me, and everyone was very jolly. Like there was an atmosphere of like professional, obviously, and but like everyone was kind of in a good mood, and that totally helped. Obviously, really helped me, and I had this very sort of jokey, but he really put me at my ease. The anaesthetist, he was a really great guy, but it also, it's funny talking about it because I haven't fully thought this through. It's so recent, it's so good to talk about it, but it put me at my ease, and it reminded me that the surgery for the surgeons is just another day at work. Yes. But the surgery for the recipient is the life-changing moment. So it's an amazing thing. And I feel for the surgeons, because this is true with anyone in the medical profession, isn't it? You have to constantly, you're seeing life and death every day, which has to become quite normal for you, because otherwise you can't really do your job properly. But it's an amazing thing being on the other side of it, because for them it was just, well, this morning I've got to do a kidney operation on this guy. Then I'm going to go out for lunch. And I'm going to get to, it was amazing. Yeah. But I saw that machine, very shiny, sparkling, like a machine, like the moment in the James Bond film where the bad guy shows you the weapon he's going to use to kill James Bond. That
machine, when you're in its presence, is intimidating. If you
sure is, definitely.
Yeah,
it's a big thing.
Yeah,
it looks like it's going to be operated by Edward Scissorhands.
Exactly. Yeah, because they sit off on the remote and they do that remotely. It's not like they're standing over you.
Exactly.
And so, fortunately, it's nice to know that once you're there, they zap you with the medicine. You're gone while they're getting everything all put together and prepped.
Exactly.
So that was. I wanted to kind of do a little simile here. There's a saying I use with all of my friends at Kidney Solutions that are anticipating getting a donor and going in for surgery. And one of the things I say is, listen, you don't ever do any anticipation, and you don't get ready for anything, and you don't expect anything until you hear that gurney slap that OR door and you go in. And you guys are present in that. That's quite an interesting story, that all the things that can happen and you don't get the surgery. Right? It doesn't happen, but eventually it will. And that's what's the encouraging part of it is it will get done. And when it gets done, and you can see two people like you guys I'm seeing you. I wish my audience could. You guys look great. You just absolutely look great. And I started out with Ben getting a hold of me via email. And it's been a great ride through all of this. I mean, all of it has been a really good, sensational thing. And I want you to know it's a privilege to be able to get to talk to you guys.
Ken, just to follow on something that you were just referencing and that Ben did as well. I mean, during the time that this extended story has been happening, both of us have had our first child.
Yes.
And I think what being present and being present for the birth of a child and dealing with the first year, 2 years of a child's life is, however many books you read, however much advice, however many podcasts you listen to, there is an element of this that you are never going to be ready for, and you will never be and maybe you never will understand, And I think the fact that we both had that in our locker meant that, yes, we read a lot, we listened to things, we spoke to people, we spoke to professors to doctors, all the way down to, I mean, not down, they're on the same level, but they're less expert donors, recipients.
Yeah.
And we felt very well briefed, very well informed. But the moment, you know, the door opens and the hospital porter standing there to take you down, you realize that you're basically flying blind. And one of the best bits of advice I actually got from anyone was a friend who had some cancer treatment recently, who basically said to me, the easiest thing to do is to utterly surrender yourself to the expertise.
Absolutely.
Every time you get on an airplane, you know, you surrender yourself to someone you can't even see, who, you know, has been training for 30 years to deal with any situation that might come up. And there's a wonderful feeling in actually just putting your hands up or putting them out, as Ben described, and just saying, I'm in the best possible hands I could be.
Absolutely.
And as Ben said, they do this like going to buy a pint of milk from the supermarket, you know?
Yeah.
And that's all they do. I mean, that's all they do. They don't go down after they're done with you and take somebody's gallbladder out.
Right.
They're back in clinic and do it. These guys and gals are systematically trained and continue. They don't do other things. They do transplants.
Yeah.
Very, very comforting. Very comforting.
I mean, I do remember speaking to a doctor at a very early stage of this who said, oh, kidney transplant, that's the easiest one of all. You could almost get a plumber to do that for you.
Yeah, you can train monkeys to do it.
I was like, that may be so, and I'm somewhat comforted by you saying that, but I don't want a plumber. I don't want a monkey. I'd like a surgeon.
Yeah,
exactly.
Who does 200 of these a year?
That's right.
That's right. This might interest you, but in Britain, until very, very recently, they had, for all types of donorship, whether it's your heart, your liver, your lungs, they had an opt-in kind of system. So you had to carry a donor card in your wallet that said you were prepared to give your organs to somebody who needs them in the event that something happened to you. In Austria, for as long as I think anyone can remember, they've had an opt-out situation, meaning per capita, they do an awful lot more of these operations traditionally. It's recently changed in Britain, I think almost within the last year or so.
Yes.
I spoke to a professor for transplant medicine in London, who Ben also had a chance to speak to. And he said, I asked him once at some stage, I said, look, should I be coming home to England and doing this there? He went, you're in one of the best places in the world.
That's
when
amazing.
We go to international conferences, we always actually seek out the Austrian surgeons because they're very, very good at what they do. And the hospital is not going to win any awards in any kind of hospital beauty contests. But what actually goes on with the nuts and bolts of the procedure itself is as good as anywhere you could be doing it on earth. So we felt fortunate, and I think we always felt pretty secure that we were in good hands. The surgeons were all very serious, competent, a little bit older, deeply serious, men of quite few words, exactly the sort of person that you would want to be manning.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
you're not there for a lecture or a comedy routine. You're there to get your kidney transplant, and you want somebody that has been doing it and has some degree of skill. They don't let them go in there until they are, they are very skilled. If they're doing transplants, they're very skilled. And you think about liver transplants, lung transplant, heart transplant. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Incredible. Yeah. Incredible.
Okay. So I think we're going to have a stop to somewhere in here, but unfortunately, can you tell me, I think the most important thing to me is how you feel right now. You've gone through all of this and it's been a great journey, but how do you feel about doing what you did right now, today? Ben?
Well, how do I feel about doing it?
Yeah, just about the whole process. Not how it came off, but why you did it.
Oh, I would do it again. I mean, I'm not going to do it again. but for obvious reasons. But
Yeah.
I would do it again in a second if I could. We talked about the phone call. I got a phone call in 2015, as we said, and it's been kind of rolling along in the background, like background noise for years and years. But my feelings about having done it now, after the operation, are the same as they were when I got that phone call, which is that I feel totally that it was, I don't know. I feel, I can't articulate it. I feel really good about it. I mean, I feel that, look, the moment where everything kind of came into, like, snapped into focus, was the moment when we found out that it had worked. Like, that was the moment where everything suddenly was justified. Having a blood pressure monitor on my arm for 24 hours, squeezing my arm with incredible force all the way through the night, which was slightly annoying at the time. Fine. All the blood being taken, fine. The enemas and the all that stuff, fine.
The stops and the starts.
The stops and the starts, the weird inconveniences and the COVID stuff and the traveling and everything. At that point, you thought, this is what it has been about. And it felt like nothing I've ever experienced before.
And you probably never will.
Yeah.
I mean, it's donors are special people, Ben. And I'm sure Jasper will tell you the same thing. I say it about my brother. Being a donor allows you to give yourself up without any fear, without any trepidation, but just knowing that you're helping somebody else out makes it all worthwhile. Even if you'd had rough recovery, it's still worth it, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Jasper,
I mean,
how about you? What's your feelings towards Ben, towards this whole process?
Tomorrow in 2 days' time, it'll be, I think, 5 weeks or 6 weeks.
6 weeks.
6 weeks. I mean, just the fact that we're now counting in fortnights rather than hours or days is kind of. I went for a walk this morning, and for the first time, I was briefly unaware of any physical impediments while I was walking down the street. There wasn't a point that was hurting. I was not going particularly fast. I was probably going a bit slower than I would normally walk, but I caught myself remembering that this had happened very recently, because I had been able to get lost in a thought and not be pulled back into my reality by my body giving me, uttering
sharp pain,
uttering a physical complaint. So that was amazing. That was an amazing moment today of utter insignificance to everybody else in the world, but
sure,
for me, it was a minor breakthrough. Coming back to Ben, because really, he's, yes, we're both doing well, and yes, it took two of us to do this, but Ben's the truly remarkable person in the situation. And the thing that I would like to sort of say, and I hope will resonate with somebody listening to this who may have gone through this or may go through this sometime in the future. Ben did two extraordinary things. One is he agreed and went through with this transplant, gave me one of his, primary organs, and basically, let's not beat around the bush, basically saved my life, because the alternative was doesn't bear thinking about. That in itself is remarkable, but Ben did something else which for me is equally remarkable, which is that over this entire, what is then 6-year period, he has made the entire journey, the process, all these various appointments, these tests, these hiccups, these anticlimactic moments where we thought we were there and actually we weren't. Moments that could at times have been awkward, have been difficult, have been problematic, even if it was my own mother or my own sister, blood relative, moments where you could have had doubt, moments he's sitting with a hospital psychologist asking him if he's really serious about this. He got married in the meantime. He became a father in the meantime, things which really focus your mind and your role and responsibilities in life. Throughout this entire process, he took the time and the trouble to constantly put me at ease. It wasn't me putting him at ease. He was diffusing situations. He was making a potentially fraught, emotionally exhausting experience so much fun, if that doesn't sound absurd. And I don't mean for a second to make light of anything that we've been through and he in particular has been through, but he made this, I was actually happy when they would call me and say, we need 3 more tests from Mr. Street, because it meant I was going to see him again.
Yeah, he was going to come across the pond and see you. Yeah.
My guts were going to be sore for a week afterwards from laughing every time he came. And I would have this grin like fixed on my face like Batman's foe for like a week afterwards, because it was just, and this diffusing of situations and this enthusiasm and this stamina, despite several setbacks, was for me a gift every bit as much as great as the transplant itself.
As the transplant itself. Yeah.
There are so many potential downsides to this, whether they're guilt, whether they're culpability, whether they're the pressure, all these sorts of things. And some of them are unavoidable for some people because of the way they tick or because of the way their donors tick. And I'm not suggesting that the path will be as smooth for everybody, because there are outside factors that influence things. But despite everything, Ben made this whole thing as easy for me and my family as possible. Gave us a certain peace of mind during a time when we almost didn't have peace of mind about anything else.
No.
And that I think is is the most remarkable thing that anyone's ever done for me. So there we go.
I want to just take just a second here, maybe more than a second. There's a general feeling between my brother and I that this was done because it had to be done. Because if it hadn't been done, I'd have died. There's no doubt in my mind. Wouldn't have survived some dialysis. I wouldn't have been around very long. Sure, probably could have found somebody else and probably would have. But in this particular case between you two people, it is a bond that you will never lose. All right? You'll never lose it. To Ben, I think your willingness to do just exactly what Jaspers explained is not only honorable, but it's something in your heart that you knew you were going to do and you were going to get it done, period. And to Jasper, I want you to just make sure for the rest of your life that you take good care of yourself. I know you will, but a lot of people don't. This transplant is not a cure, but this transplant can last you because it's living, a living donor. This transplant can last you a long time. And I'm evidence of that. All right. And I just want you both to know how much I appreciate you. And I'm going to hunt you down, both of you. I'm going to hunt you down. We're going to meet and we're going to celebrate. Okay.
Yes, we are.
And there will be Schnitzel.
And it will be Schnitzel. Yes. And seeing that my biological clock is ticking, it's going to be soon. Fear not. All right.
Better be.
All right. Yeah. Thank you guys for coming on. And to all you folks out there, just remember one thing. Persistence is one thing, but knowledge is another. Think about donating, it's one thing. And think about going after transplants, another. But this whole process works. There's no downside to a transplant. There is none. Yeah, there might be complications. There might be issues that come up in life that cause you to be at risk. But guess what? You have a transplant. You're living. All right. And to the donors out there that are thinking about donating, give us a call at Kidney Solutions. I'll put you in touch with Ben. He'll tell you all about it. I'll put you in touch with my brother. I'll put you in touch with hundreds of people who've done this. It's easy and it's life-saving. So until next time, keep breathing.